Tell Me More podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. My name is Olivia Molly Rogers and I'm excited to get comfortable in the uncomfortable with you and remind you that nobody is perfect and everybody has something going on behind the scenes that you may not know about. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome back to Tell Me More. Today we are joined by the lovely Maria Thattil. Maria is a published author, actor, host, presenter, columnist and creator. She is also a TEDx speaker and Revlon's brand partner. Maria is a huge advocate for stepping outside of your comfort zone and breaking down conventional barriers and speaking up for what you believe in. Thank you so much for joining me, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me. Why is it that when someone reads out information about you or talks about you, like you don't know where to look? While you were doing that, I'm like,
I feel like it's a similar feeling to when people look at you and sing happy birthday and you're like,
yeah, you can't make eye contact.
It's uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable.
There's a lot there.
There is that. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And
it's a lot.
There was more that we could have included. You are so impressive. You always have been, but I feel like since I met you, which was it was before you won Miss Universe.
Yeah, I think it was.
But since then, like you have just absolutely, you never cease to amaze me with the things that you achieve.
Bless, that's so sweet. I still remember that night that I won. It was you who stepped in and we didn't have a crown because it was COVID, but you did like a fake crowning, an invisible crowning. And it was so sweet that now we're here, like how crazy 3 years later, time flies.
No? Oh,
it'll be 4 years. It'll be 4 years in October. Wow. Yeah, it's gone quick.
How would you describe yourself to a complete stranger if they didn't know any of what I just said?
You know what I say when strangers actually ask what I do? I'm like, I just do stuff across media. Because it's like, how do you sort of introduce and explain like all these different things? But if I was to describe myself, I'd probably say I'd say I'm kind. I'm very proud of that. I'm kind. I'm an introverted extrovert. Mm-hmm. So on the surface, like I think a lot of what I do takes a lot of like social battery. But for me, I'm just the kind of person who wants to go home, switch off, recharge by myself. And I like, I'm pretty ambitious. I value my family and I'm really lucky to get to do what I do. I'm very grateful. That's probably what, I'd say to sum it up.
I love that. You always answer things so well.
I felt like I rambled. I'm like, what would I even say? I'm obsessed with my dog.
I hear you answering questions and I'm like, this is why she won Miss Universe because you can wrap things up so perfectly and eloquently always. For those who don't know any of your story, can you tell me a little bit about how you ended up doing what you're doing now?
It's so crazy when I think of how I ended up here because to me, it's like the perfect example of you never know what's around the corner. And I love that. I think that's so exciting for so many of us to live life thinking my life could be one way today and then in a year it could be completely different. So I had a pretty normal upbringing. My parents, they moved here in like the 90s. They were working class. They worked in factories while I was in school. And after uni, I was pretty, I'm going to say studious. I thought I was going to do I'm going to have a corporate career. I'm going to do this and I'm going to just work in HR. Because I guess when I was growing up, I was a very creative kid, but there wasn't really anyone who was like me doing the kinds of things I'm doing now. So I didn't think it was possible. So I thought I'll succeed, but I'll do it in a way that's allowed. And so I ended up going into corporate. And then it's such a funny story. I used to work for the Victorian government. And one day there was a fire drill. I'm not sure if I've ever told the story. There was a fire drill. And I saw Priya Sarao, who would later go on to become Miss Universe Australia 2019. And I recognized her because she followed me on Instagram. So I, messaged her. I'm like, hey, were you just downstairs at the fire drill? And she's like, yeah, I was. And we followed each other. I kept following her journey and later saw she was a Miss Universe finalist. And then I remember the night I saw her win. I was watching it on live. And the only thing I can say is I just had this overwhelming feeling of, I really want to know what that feels like. And I think it's possible to know what that feels like because she was not what I expected to, see as a Miss Australia. She's an Indian Australian lawyer. And I just couldn't get it out of my brain after that.
That's
and
so cool.
It was just very, it just made me think maybe I could do things my way and a little bit differently. I sat on it for a little bit, and then I ended up applying, and then it just sort of set the wheels in motion. And we had COVID, there were a lot of obstacles, but then we got here. And I think it was just that one moment of seeing someone who you can relate to in some way do something extraordinary. It makes you feel like you can do it too.
I love that, because I think that exact thing has become such a big part of the message that you share, that is, you can't be what you can't see.
No.
And you always talk about representation, and it's so cool. Does Priya know that is why you...
I feel like I say it in like every single interview, because I seriously owe it to her. Like I think she knows, and I think I've told her, because then when I won, she was, in my corner celebrating that for me. But she was so much of the reason why I thought it was possible. And before that, it was not even something that I entertained. But see, like, she represented what was possible to me. But because I opened myself up to thinking that, I was able to create a whole new life that was entirely different to anything I was living or that I thought I was living. And so I try and keep that now every time I say to myself, I'm going to do something different. I want to do something big. I'm going to do something crazy. It's just, I remind myself, look at what was possible then. You can do anything now.
I remember vividly around the time you won Miss Universe Australia that you spoke about how you had previously used makeup as a way to change your appearance. So rather than enhancing your natural beauty, which you have in stacks, you were trying to change the way you looked. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, but my relationship with makeup has changed so much over the course of my life. Like when I look back to my childhood, my mum, so she used to work, like I said, in factories. And so she'd get up at like 3 a.m. and I would hear her getting ready for work. She'd leave at 4 a.m. for work. But no matter how early it was, how tired she was, what she was doing, she always made time to look after herself. And she'd wake up in the mornings, and some mornings I'd wake up a little early and I'd catch a peek, and she'd be putting her makeup on. I always remember it was her super lustrous lipstick sitting on her vanity. And I remember the smell of her perfume when she'd leave to go to work. It was like Red Door or something like that. I just remember the smell very vividly. And when I would look at that, that was just so magical to me. Like watching her just be so in tune with herself, give herself that like 10, 15 minutes, however long it took, to look after herself and invest in herself and use makeup to self-express and how she shows up. So I love that. And my grandma used to say the same thing, take pride in your appearance. And so as a kid, I used to think that. And then when I went to school, so I grew up, growing up in Australia in the early 2000s, I didn't have the easiest time. And I often talk about racism and what that was like for me. But bullying, I think anyone who's listening to this, like you don't have to be a person of color to know what relentless bullying can do to a person. I was a very shy kid as well, so I didn't feel like I could challenge the people who sort of, they were meant to be my friends. And so because I grew up in a time where, you didn't really see any people of color in Australian media. They didn't even have shades of foundation, in supermarkets and pharmacies and things like that. So you're constantly getting these messages from around the world telling you that you don't fit what's Australian. And then when you're watching TV, the only thing you see is people of color being shown as exaggerated stereotypes. And so you think that when people make fun of your accent or your food, and for me it was, are your parents taxi drivers, and do they, own 7-Elevens, and do your parents bob their head when they talk? When people would say this stuff, I used to laugh alongside with them because I thought, well, I'm different. And so this is the price to pay. If I want to fit in with these people, you've got to laugh along with these jokes.
But also easier to go along with it and laugh along than try and stand up for yourself.
Because it was just me. Like, if I'm standing up for myself, who's there to back me? You're outnumbered. I was a quiet kid, so it was really, really hard in school. And so when I got to my teens, they used to say things about my skin. And I have this one memory of, there was an Italian girl, and I wrote about this in my book. She had come back from like a vacation and everyone was swooning over her tan. And I remember one of the girls explicitly said, I love her European. It's like this European golden brown, and it's not like the dirty Indian brown that Maria has. So
Maria.
I was like, people just said this stuff. Like they just whatever came to mind, they could say whatever they wanted. There was never any consequences. And I, like, so much in me has moved past that. But I think the effects of, if like I get emotional, it's just like that kid is still in there.
Yeah.
And I think when I talk about like bullying and things like that, I still have this thing where like I'll walk into spaces, and you know what it's like at these events that we go to, and no matter how much I do or accomplish, I'll still walk into a space and go, I don't know if people are going to like me, or are they going to judge me, or are they going to think, it's like this anxiety and this insecurity about yourself, and I have to consciously overcome it. So I'm quite an anxious person because of all of that in school. But with makeup, makeup went from being this beautiful thing that was like, this is how you self-express, to this is how I'm going to mask myself, because I thought I needed to change myself. So do you remember the little, they had the little mousse foundations? I used to wear one that was like 3 shades too light, and I'd wear green eye contacts, and I'd wear the foundation on the lips and lots of bronzer, because that's what, you know, all the fair skinned girls at my school were doing. So makeup became a mask for me. And for a long time it was that. But I started to unlearn that in my 20s when I started to follow people on social media. And I love social media for this. So many people say social media is negative and it's got all these like, you know, and it has its flaws. But I remember it started to connect us to people outside our little bubble. And I followed this Indian blogger in America who's now a huge beauty CEO. And I felt so seen by her, and I would listen to what she'd say about her experiences, and it made me realize what I went through in school, and it made me angry for a period. So I started to unlearn that, and then I actually went back and did a makeup qualification, became a qualified makeup artist whilst I was doing my master's, and I totally reclaimed that. And now makeup is mine, and it's just one of my favorite things about, you know, it just makes me happy. It brings me joy, makeup, fashion, all those things. And now it's no longer a mask. So, yeah.
You are so good at your makeup.
I had to be. And also how handy to do it, you know, in our industry where I don't want to rely on someone else and then someone doesn't get it right, or my skin tone or things like that. So it was good to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that you went through what you did with bullying. I think most people can relate somewhat, but you know, a lot of us can't when it comes to racism and growing up in Australia. I think at that time it was really bad, because even as you're telling stories like that, I remember kids at my school being picked on for similar things, and I just want to go back and hug them and support them. But I think even as, you know, white Australians, like a lot of us wouldn't have known how to stand up to it as well, because we hadn't seen that.
And
like,
you probably
it was so
didn't
normalized.
have those, and you probably didn't have those conversations. You know, it wasn't being had. It just wasn't. So what would you say? You know, I mean, I didn't even know how to stand up for myself. But I think with any kind of bullying, whether it's for your race or your weight or whatever it is, people should talk to their kids about it and, you know, have those conversations. It's so interesting because I wrote about all of this in my book. Never would name and shame anyone, because if I can change as much as I have since school, I'm sure the people who did this have also grown, and a lot of them have kids now. And many of them actually wrote into me apologizing. It was a vague apology, but like there was like 7 or 8 messages that I got.
Really?
And it was always, I've been sitting on this, and if there was ever anything I did that hurt you in school, or, you know, they reflected on it, and in a way they came back. And now I know that by me sharing my story, they'll break that cycle with their kids and hopefully tell their kids don't pick on kids for their differences, you know? Yeah.
I love that. I hope that they're apologizing though, because they actually mean it, and not just to like clear
Don't
their
call
conscience.
me out.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think I learned a long time ago, like I can't hope for anything other than, you know, I need to just forgive and release it for myself.
Yeah.
And because I'm still carrying so much of it.
Oh, you can see, like you
know?
you get emotional when you talk about it, and I completely understand that feeling too, because you think about your inner child. And I remember my inner child, like when I was bullied for my weight, and it's when you go back there and you bring it up, it holds so much, and it shapes who you are so much.
Yeah.
Like I am so certain that comments like that ended up, you know, resulting in having some part in me ending up with an eating disorder. And it's so sad when you think about that and you think about the impact that bullies have on kids, because it isn't just in the moment and the embarrassment and shame that you feel in the moment. It's this ongoing thing that can really stick with you. But I think you've used yours in such a positive way to turn it around and be such an amazing, inspiring role model for so many young Australians.
Well, as have you, Liv, because you do speak about your stuff very candidly. But I think that's so important to represent that honestly, because I personally don't want to act like I got out of school and then all this amazing stuff happened and now I'm past it and that's it. Like, I think it's so important to reflect and represent, you know, the reality of what happens when you've had that. Like with you, you know, I see sometimes people leave ridiculous remarks on your social media and you'll address it and why certain things can be triggering to someone who had an eating disorder or was bullied for this sort of thing. And it's the same thing with me when I get those comments, and I think it's important to talk about it and share it and let people know that when you do this and when you perpetuate this, you do shape somebody's entire self-perception and then you're affecting how they show up in the world. Like, I'm 31. This was 20 something years ago and it still hurts. And I still feel like sometimes, I don't know, even if it's, I get uncomfortable in certain situations where, I don't know, if I feel like, I don't know how to explain it. Not like jokes are made at my expense, but I'm like super sensitive. And it comes from being a kid who just had to cop it all and couldn't say, actually, this is really hurtful and this is pushing my boundaries. I couldn't say that then, but now I can. And now I'm an adult who has a voice. And like you said, yeah, I'd rather use it to show people this is what can change. This is what, you know, happens, and hopefully encourage them to do better.
Yeah. I love that. Now, you said your relationship with makeup has shifted a lot. How do you think the beauty industry itself has changed in that time? Because I think there's been an enormous change, even from what you said about, you know, you didn't used to see your shade of foundation.
Yeah, that was such a big thing. I used to work for a beauty company, and I remember at the time, this was years ago, and they were bringing in foundations of like a new luxury foundation. And I remember asking, oh great, like when will we be getting my shade in? Because obviously I want to try it. And I remember being told Australia wasn't the market for it. Like, imagine saying, like,
what does that mean?
People of color in Australia aren't the market for luxury makeup.
Don't exist.
Like, yeah, it's like you don't exist, and also you're just not the target demographic. So who is Australian? You know what I mean? And so that was crazy. It's like, hey, so this is insane. Like, that's a little insane. And since then, I'm so grateful to have seen that, like with social media now. It used to be that beauty brands were the ones calling the shots, and they'd tell us, this is what we're putting out there, this is what you're going to love, this is what's going to be amazing. But now I feel like with social media, we have the voice, and by we I mean everybody, you know. So we get to choose, we vote with our money, we say what's, you know, going to be successful, what's not, what's good enough, what's not. And so I think a few things have changed. One, people actually want good products, and people are so much more knowledge savvy. Like kids these days, oh my God, I sounded so old saying that.
As soon as that comes out of my mouth, I feel the same. I'm like, oh no.
No, but like seriously, like for example, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, like they didn't go through the phase that I had no eyebrows in high school. I didn't know what I was doing with makeup, and now they know how to like beat a face. Like it's all on TikTok. They know everything.
What did you say?
They know how to like beat their face.
Oh,
and like
I've never heard that phrase.
Oh, we sound like old millennials. And I'm trying to like teach them, like, oh, it's actually like the new slang, like the kids these days are saying. You're so welcome. I feel like I just made us sound so old.
No, that's me asking the questions.
Both of us. Oh my God, don't. So basically they know how to do their makeup. They speak a lot cooler than us. Clearly we can't keep up with the lingo, but they know what they're doing, and so they demand better products. But also I think one thing's changed where people want to see brands reflect the communities they're meant to be serving. So if you're a beauty brand in Australia, you got to reflect Australia, and that's people of different abilities, people of different sizes, people of different skin tones. I think the industry is becoming more inclusive. It's not there yet, but it's getting there. And also, I think there's this huge pressure, and we're probably seeing it at the moment with the whole Blake Lively PR situation that's going down at the moment. Without getting into that, I think people these days are demanding a lot more from the brands that they want in terms of alignment to values. So if you're going to say you care about something, like put your money where your mouth is. And so like for me, you said at the start of this, I'm so proud to be a Revlon brand partner. And I've worked with just about, you know, many beauty brands. But what I love about Revlon is, for me, like so much of what I'm doing in my career right now, I've not seen someone do all of that and package up in one person and be like, I'm going to do this and this and this, even if it doesn't seem possible, I'm going to do it. So there are many firsts in that way. And Revlon's a brand of firsts. So, you know, they're one of the first brands to feature an African-American woman in their advertising. You know, they were the first to have a celebrity ambassador. And I think for them, if they say, like, their motto is live boldly, they actually do it. And so I think people want brands that actually put their money where their mouth is when they say what their values are. And you see it. You see it with brands sort of coming in and out of relevance, and those that hold power. That's why.
I would love for you. It's funny that you just said how you're 31 and we're getting old, both of us. 31's not really old. But
It's not. But we're not like, you know, remember when everyone used to look down on millennials and be like, oh, you guys are like the young, like, generation. We're not that anymore.
No, I know.
We're not that anymore.
Do you know what I hate? When you're, you know, standing in the line or something and you might be in the way, or a kid bumps you, and then the parent will be like, oh, look out for the lady. I'm like, when did I stop getting called a girl? I don't think I want to be the lady.
I don't want to be a lady yet.
I don't want to be a lady.
That's a girl bumping into another girl.
We're just kids here.
I'm just a 31-year-old kid trying to figure my way out. I also want my mum at the checkout. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel you. It's like, it's so weird. We're in that different. I do feel like we are in. I don't know about you, but hitting 31, I do feel like it's like a new phase of, I feel different to my 20s.
Well, who am I kidding? I'm actually 32. So, but yeah,
you're like my wise elder.
I am a lady.
you're oh my God. She's like, don't say that, please. No. Sage wisdom.
It's okay. No, it's aging is a privilege.
It is.
I feel fine about it.
You know, it's okay to laugh and joke about it though. Like, of course, aging is a privilege, but you know, I want to still be young and cool, you know?
My God, yeah. And every grey hair that pops up when I look in the mirror, I'm like in denial. But I loved, you wrote this awesome article that was 31 things I've learned at 31. Yeah. And I love so much about it. You started by sharing some of the initial goals. How old were you when you wrote these down?
I was 21.
Okay. So literally, 10 years ago. And you actually brought them with you. Some of them were like silly, you know, or I shouldn't say silly.
You can call them silly, babe. When I read them out, like, people are going to be like,
some of them are silly,
ridiculous.
But some of them were, you know, more heartfelt and deeper. And some of them were like, I don't know, fun. Yeah. And you wanted to have a romantic fling with a man overseas.
Did it.
Well done.
Check, tick.
And, you know, like bungee jump and what else did I have? They were a few that stood out, but then the ones that were a little bit more complex, I'd love to read back to you. Maybe you can read us some of the fun ones. Though.
I'll read you some of mine, because you know what you just said, like some were like silly, some were this, some were that. I think it just reflects what is going on in like a 21-year-old's mind of anything is possible. So I'm just going to put anything that comes to mind, but I think we should still live like that. You know, but also, it's funny what holds such great importance at that age. Yeah. And I love that you have it and that you can reflect on it, because like one of them, you were 21 and you said get engaged at 25 or 26. Oh my God.
But in brackets, it was like not too soon. But that was only like 4 or 5 years later. Like that was pretty soon.
I'm just making sure, you know, future me knows, don't do it too soon.
Yeah,
like chill. She had to get like specific.
You can get married at 26.
Yeah, 26 and a half maybe. I don't know. So this is like, oh my God, it's so... Okay, listen to this. So yeah, have a romantic short-lived fling with a foreign man overseas. And then the one exactly after that is have cocktails for breakfast. Like the epitome of ambition.
Did you do that at the same time? That would have made sense.
Probably. And then I've got ride a donkey in a Greek city. Learn to cook. And then I've got... So this is after learn to cook. find myself as a person accepting of all my flaws and imperfections.
I wrote that one down because that's deep.
That's a big one.
And that's huge.
That's a few things to unpack.
I don't know if you could actually, if anyone can fully achieve that in their lifetime.
I don't know if anyone can. And it's just things like ride a horse, and then after that, donate my organs, and then in brackets it says sign up.
As in, like,
just to
don't
clarify,
just give them away.
Don't harvest your organs and give them away. So like it was this chaotic list of I'm going to do this, but a few things in there was like write a book on motivation and mental resilience. And at 21, I thought I was that was actually before I went back and even did my master's. Like I had no concept that I was not going to work in a corporate job or study and be doing what I'm doing now. But somewhere in there, that spark was there of I want to do something with impact. And I think that's so sweet that it manifested in a way that was bigger than anything I could have conceived of, but it was always there. Even in that like chaotic young girl, it was always there.
I love it. I think it shows the importance of actually writing your goals down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not being afraid of big goals like that.
Yeah.
One that stood out to me though was you said you'd like to go out one day with no makeup.
Yeah.
How much of a shift is like, you post yourself constantly with no makeup on?
But that was inconceivable to me back then. You know what's so wild? So I have just being deeper skin toned. I have, what I think are noticeable dark circles. And when I was younger, I thought they were like this is so specific, but I thought they were the worst dark circles I've ever seen on a human being in the world. Like no one has worse dark circles than me. Something's wrong. I look sick. And when I was 18, I went to like a dermatologist or a laser clinic or something. And I was like, okay, I'm 18 now. What are you going to do to get rid of these? And I remember the doctor saying to me, no, it's just genetic. Like there's nothing wrong. It's just what you look like. And I went in my car and I cried. And then I remember watching back footage of when I visited my dad's family from where he's from in India. And a lot of the women look like that. And that is what happens when maybe you don't see things about yourself normalized. You think something's wrong with you because I thought I was the only one. And so for me, I hated the way I looked. So makeup was a mask for a period of time. But I also think, like, sorry to interrupt you, but in magazines too, often it would be get rid of your dark circles. Yeah.
They would tell you how to do that.
Yeah.
And similar with something like acne. I know they used to always show celebrities in magazines being like caught out without makeup on. And if any flaws were there, they were like, oh my God, how hideous.
Yeah.
So as any child with an insecurity that then is being shown as this terrible thing, you're like, oh, well, I have to cover it up.
Absolutely.
Or find a way to change it permanently.
Of course. And what you just said about the magazines, it was like whenever they'd show celebrities with no makeup, just living their lives, going about their day, it was like they're disheveled. What's wrong? They look sad. Has something happened in their life? It was like this crazy thing. And so I thought that if I presented in what is a very normal, like no makeup, natural state, that's something's wrong. I look disheveled. I look this. I'm not whatever. So I'd never go out without makeup, including when I started dating my boyfriend we dated for like 5 years. I would wear makeup to bed. And I would wake up in the morning and I would have my crusty mascara
and I did that too.
And concealer, and I'd go quickly touch up and then go back to bed like that scene in Bridesmaids and be like, oh my God, I just woke up like this. But it was crusty.
Same.
It was crusty. I'm like,
and I'm like, as if he thinks I actually woke up looking like this.
Just with mascara, with concealer.
Or they're not, I don't know. He wasn't very observant, I don't think.
Mine didn't really know like too much about makeup either and probably thought, okay, maybe.
But morning concealer.
Morning concealer.
To the bathroom. What a waste of time.
It's crazy. So now, obviously, I'm like, you know what? That's so ridiculous. I think as part of everything I learned in my 20s, it's like makeup is there for me to use to feel good and to enhance what I like about myself. But I don't need to hide behind. I'm okay with or without it. I'm beautiful with and without it. So that has been a journey. But so crazy for me that at 21, that was like a big, alongside write a book and all these big goals, go out makeup free was
once,
just once,
one day,
one day, and then you never have to do it again. It was like, that was the attitude. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And it's crazy to think how you can fixate on something and you think it's the worst thing, but probably no one else is looking at you thinking about that thing.
100%. And it was so funny because I was having this conversation with one of my girlfriends, one of my best friends, and she was talking about something that she's particularly insecure about. And she was sort of pottering off in the kitchen, and another one of our best friends, we were looking at her and we were saying to each other, God, she's just got such a beautiful face, doesn't she? Like, we were just saying that about our friend. And then she came to us and started complaining about this thing that we would never notice. And before I went to go say to her, like, what, Mike, you're crazy, why don't you see? I realized, oh my God, I do that to me, to myself. And I feel like, so I think everyone does it. Everyone who's going to be listening to your podcast and to this episode will know we are our own biggest critic. But I think those things will never change, and it's up to us to change how we talk to ourselves because it's damaging. Yeah.
I was having this conversation with my cousin just the other day about not actually voicing how you feel. Like, say you're having a day where you feel a bit, I don't know, you don't feel like yourself and you don't feel like you look as good, you don't feel as confident. We were traveling together and she would often voice those thoughts. And she's so beautiful. And I hope she doesn't get upset with me saying any of this.
Is this someone you were traveling with?
Yeah, Georgie.
You are so beautiful, Georgie. Like,
she's
is
so
beautiful.
And she
so
does
beautiful.
listen to every episode. Bless you, George. But she would have, something that she was feeling and she would say it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't talk about my cousin that way. And I would like stop her from saying it. And she's like, oh, you never really say things like that about yourself. And I'm like, oh, I might think them. But I've learned, and it was a big part of recovery from an eating disorder and things that I've learned in therapy is like, as soon as you voice it, you reinforce it and you believe it more. Whether you choose to or not, they do.
Our words have power.
So as soon as I speak it out loud, it's like reaffirming. So I choose to not.
Yeah.
And I was like, George, that doesn't mean I don't think these things. Like,
it
100%.
still pops up, but you don't have to believe every thought you have. It's not all true.
And I said to her, like, the way that I feel, if you say something negative about yourself and I want to stick up for you and stop you from saying that about yourself, because she's so beautiful inside and out, is how, I want to feel about myself. Like, you want to, speak to yourself like you would speak 100%. To a friend or a loved one. Yeah. And it makes such a difference with how you feel about yourself.
100%. And it's so funny when we think about the people we love in our lives. Like, I think of my mum or my dad or my brother, my partner, my friends. I would never speak to the people I love the way that my inner voice, sometimes speaks to me. And I think it's really important for people who are listening, like, when you think about growing and healing and getting past these things, it doesn't mean that you don't have these thoughts at all. They will still come up, and that's not you. They're not coming from you. That's a result of conditioning. That's a result of the magazines we're talking about. That's a result of what we've seen in media. That's a result of maybe what a bully has said to you at some point in your life, and it's stuck with you. It's not your thoughts. You can choose to say, I hear it, but I don't need to accept it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I do now, because I don't want to put pressure on myself to kind of go, I want to run away from my own head, because why won't that chatter stop no matter how good I feel? I think you come to accept it as that's the conditioned mind and you are not your conditioned mind.
I love that. Yeah. When back to that article, the 31 lessons. So we haven't actually spoken about any of the lessons, and they were so great. I could relate to so many of them. There were two that stood out to me that I would love to read back to you. The first one is, the things we grow up being ashamed of that we think we need to shed, like embarrassing family, nerdy interests, or our looks, are sometimes what you end up coming home to. I love that, because I feel that within myself, and I see that in you. Obviously, I didn't know you when you were younger, but I think the way that you share, funny, silly moments with your family, and then you share snippets of videos of you and Dom when you were younger doing dances and things.
Yeah.
It's like it seems like you tried to sort of squash that for a period of time, but you have come back to it.
Yeah. You know what's so sweet? And I love that you brought that up. Yes, my family and the way that we are, like, we're a loud, big family, and every weekend growing up we had parties, and there was a lot of food and all this sort of thing. And then I did try and squash that. I was so ashamed, like, in my teens. And again, it was a lot of that internalized racism. Actually, I didn't talk to my cousins in my teens, and I tried to distance myself. I didn't want to eat our food. I didn't want to wear the clothes, and I was ashamed of that. Also ashamed of the fun, creative things my brother and I used to do. And it's funny because my partner was at my house and we were watching like some old videos, and there's this video of me at 8 at a family party and like trying to find the camera wherever it was and, dancing and wanting to just, she was just so like, yep, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be doing. I just want to be in front of the camera and having fun. And then, in my teens and 20s, I thought, no, well, I'll go into corporate. Like I can't do that. That's fine. But then as an adult, it's like, no, I'm going to go back to all of that. I'm going to go back to finding my roots in my family, being proud in, who we are, what our culture is, and being that kid who loves to just be silly and doesn't think twice about how it's going to look. And my partner said to me, she said, when I look at that little kid and I see what you're doing every time you do an audition or what you're doing for what your dreams are now, I see that kid. And it's like you're doing her justice because you've become what I guess she wanted to be. So all the things, whether it's your family or whether it's a creative pursuit that you loved and you gave it up for your listeners, I think it's just not denying yourself what your soul is called to do and called to be. Yeah. So it's a beautiful feeling.
I love it. That was such a good one. And the other one I would love to read back is, therapy is an oh-so-healing privilege. Over time, it'll help you untangle even the most complicated parts of your psyche. I would love for you to share some things that you have learned through therapy that you're happy to share. Of course.
So I started seeing my therapist back in 2022, and I started seeing her when I think at the time I'd just come off Miss Universe and I just filmed, and then it aired, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in Australia, and everything was so crazy and busy. And I started to realize I had a real issue with whenever there was a perceived period of like downtime. And it's like, I was riding this high of Miss Universe, like amazing. And then in between Miss Universe and booking I'm a Celebrity, which mind you, Liv was only like 2 months, I was like, oh my God, what do I do now? I don't know how to be in this quiet period. Then I'm a Celebrity happened and I was occupied with that. And then it aired and I was like, what do I do now? What's to like, am I, going to have everything taken away? Is it going to go? And I was really struggling with what is quite natural for any work cycle, especially in our industry. You have projects, you have peaks, then you have quiet moments, you work on stuff. The next thing comes, that's okay. But I really struggled to sit in on that. And so I started working with my therapist and I'm like, why am I like this? And I realized that because I spent so much of my childhood and my school years feeling so unseen and so unheard and so rejected for who I was, I'd sort of then come into Miss Universe Australia and it was like all of a sudden for the first time I'm being myself, I'm being me, I'm being truthful, and there's a place and people see you and they belong and it's amazing. But then I started to conflate my sense of self and who I am with what my achievements were. And so I was okay so long as I was achieving. I was okay as long as I was booking everything. I was okay as long as I was launching something. And you get tired of that pretty quickly.
And because the higher the achievement, then the next goal needs to be
it's
higher
like an
as well to meet it.
You need another hit.
Yeah.
And it needs to be bigger. It needs to be, because pretty soon you get desensitized to it. And what happened last year, I had probably the biggest year that I had to date. It was like TED Talk, podcast, book came out. I was on all these shows, guest hosting, doing all this stuff. I felt nothing. Like I couldn't feel it. I couldn't sit in any of them. I remember doing my TED Talk. I couldn't even step back and go, wow, I just fulfilled my dream of giving a TED Talk. I was just desensitized because I'm like, what's next? I'm not allowed to sit in this and be happy for what I've achieved because I'm not enough if I'm not constantly achieving. So working with my therapist, she helped me realize that a lot of that was tied to my childhood. And it was because I grew up thinking that I was only worth something if I was achieving. And so you start to lose sight of who you are. And working with her, I've been able to unpack that and go, look, the things that are happening in my career are pretty great. And my ambitions, it's all good and well to have that, but I need to be okay outside of it. And that's why for the first time this year, I'm now in a relationship and I have a personal life and I'm able to balance that and also let myself have love and family and all those things, because I don't feel like who I am is tied to my output. I still have that like little voice that still creeps in, but I just work through it with her. And that's with therapy. It's like nothing has to be wrong. It's like we go to a doctor for a checkup, you see your therapist for mentally what's going on. But she's really helped me unpack that. And I didn't realize that was in the driver's seat for such a long time till I had therapy. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't go on like this. I'm just going to lose myself and have like a breakdown over it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's been really valuable.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How often do you see your therapist now?
Every week.
Oh, that's so
every
good.
week. Yeah. I think, you know, whenever I'm going through something, I try and keep it at that frequency, or, you know, I'm very lucky that I get to see her and do that. But every week to every 2 weeks. Yeah. And it's one of the best parts of my, is that what you do it at the start of your week?
It depends on my schedule. I actually was meant to see my psych today, but I had to reschedule. So seeing him Thursday. So it varies, like either a Tuesday or a Thursday. And it's funny how things change. I never do it on a Monday. I think Mondays, I don't know why. I don't know if you experience this, but I find Mondays can be a day that like a lot of stuff comes up because it's the beginning of the week. And I might have had a really nice weekend where I've sort of switched off, and then Mondays roll around and I feel this pressure to get lots of things done. You don't...
No, I mean, that's so fair. Yeah. Like that, everyone's so different. I get really excited about Mondays.
Oh, really?
Like, oh, it's a new week. Like, and I'm excited about work. And I feel like that's such a privilege. But I do like to do my therapy on Mondays because I feel like
sets you up
at the end of the day. So not like bang on, like, you know, 9 a.m. let's go. But at the end of the day, and then it sets up the rest of the week. Like, let's work through something or something, you know, I've been thinking on over the weekend or whatever it is. So, I mean, everyone's different. And there's no rules for like how you should approach therapy and your own sense of well-being. But
I think you just have to kind of like figure it out and try and test. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
If there is someone listening who is struggling with what you used to struggle with and, you know, turning to makeup or clothes or something to hide their insecurities and cover up, is there a piece of advice you have for them?
Yeah, there is. I'm thinking like, even thinking back to what would I tell younger me? And I know people will say, oh, it gets better, hang in there. Like, I don't want to give sometimes positive advice that can come across like in a toxic way in terms of I'm not seeing and I'm negating what you're actually going through. It's really hard. Like for anyone who's going through any kind of self-rejection and they're using whether it's makeup or clothes or, you know, food or whatever it is to sort of self-soothe and deal what's going on emotionally, I do want to let them know that yes, it can get better, but what I would encourage them to do is talk to someone, whether it is a parent, whether it's a trusted friend. If you have, you know, the privilege and the means to talk to a professional, talk to someone, because it is possible to untangle that and for things to get better. But you can't, you know, we can't do things alone. We need to lean on the people around us. And I would also tell them to be super strict and guard, I guess, the gates of their mind. Guard the gates of your mind with such tenacity and ferocity. Like, I think it's important to not consume things that further feed negative narratives, and look at people who have gotten through it. Look at people who have changed things. Look at people who inspire you that things can change. I think I'd be really careful about what you consume and talk to people, but to also know it is possible because there are other people who have gotten through it too, and you can as well. So that would be my advice.
That's really great advice.
Yeah. And also the things that they're struggling with and what they're trying to push down. I think we do live in a world where we're taught that there's something wrong with being different or that our differences is something to shed, like I said. But they might not see it now, but I hope that if they take my advice, they can get to a place in their life where their differences become their power. And I know mine have. But it was a journey. But you just, you know, be committed to it. It's worth it.
Love that.
Yeah.
At 31 now, is there anything that you had in that little book there that you thought you would have achieved and you haven't yet achieved and don't feel great about?
Do you know what? If I'm being really honest, it's hard to say because the things I wanted to achieve back then and what I considered an achievement back then, that's changed. And I don't necessarily want to do those things anymore. Do you know what I wrote? I've actually got it in here and it's so cringe because I actually drew a picture in here. I think I was like 19, but I wrote this piece in here about how I wanted to, at the time I was doing a psychology degree. I'm going to find it and I'm going to out myself because it's so cringe.
I love this. There's so much in there.
There is, guys, there's like 10 years of trauma in here. But like I also, can I just say, this was like before the era of like social media, right? So I've written printout quotes.
Printed, okay.
It's like scrapbook style because we didn't have Instagram. And this one says, never run for a bus, train, or a man. When one leaves, another arrives. And then I've gone back to write true with 4 exclamation marks. I don't know what happened, but I'm like, yes, it's true. This is like the equivalent of like going back on an old Instagram post and commenting to yourself. Oh my God, here it is. Please don't think I'm so cringe. I drew myself living out the scenario on the really couch cute. With the coffee. I drew myself and I said how at the time, I think I was 20 or 21 when I wrote this, I wanted to be a 25-year-old psychologist. I wanted to be living with a fiance, have my own home. I wanted to be engaged and to have my own practice. Like that's what I thought I was going to do. And I was studying psychology and I did do like, I started doing the honors program and working towards it. But that changed when I was in my late 20s and I didn't end up going down the psychology route. I went down business. And then all of a sudden I thought, why am I keeping my ambition small? That's when I started unlearning all the racism and things like that. I saw Priya win and I'm like, actually, I'm just going to completely pivot and change everything that I wanted to aspire to. I'm going to go in a whole new direction. And I love that because now I look back.
Just for 1 second though, you say that they're small, but like having your own practice and all this stuff, like that was still pretty big.
They're huge. Not like
just a different vibe.
Different. Yeah. I'd say like they were both big aspirations, but totally different. But for me, like the idea of being in media was like this big, huge dream. And so for me, like back then, anything paled in comparison to that. And so this was a very big ambition. It was just a totally different space. And I don't regret that it's not what I pursued, and I don't regret that it's not what I did. And there was a while where I disappointed myself because I thought I wanted to do that, but I'm terrible at statistics, and that's such a big part of psychology. So I really struggled with that. And then I started to have this sense of dread around doing like the further studies you needed to do. And I was so disappointed because I was like, what am I going to do now? Like I went out of uni and I thought this was the path. And I think a lot of young people feel that pressure. But I just took some time off. I literally took time off, worked in retail, went back, did my master's, did a makeup qualification. And the reason I'm here is because I was just kind of open and I followed one footstep at a time. I didn't say, well, I'm going to be Miss Universe and an author and all this stuff. I was like one foot in front of the other. At the moment, this feels good. I'm going to do a makeup qualification. At the moment, this feels good. I'll start a social media channel. So I think it's just allowing yourself to just follow the breadcrumbs. And then I always say eventually you'll look back and you'll see that they marked your trajectory. So that sort of openness, I try and still have it now where like I did all of that stuff and now it's acting. Huge pursuit. And one day I hope I look back on this and I'm like, I've done all the things I wanted to do in that space. And I look back and I'm like, wow, but it's tough. It's really, really big. But why not? Why not me? And I think you have to tell yourself that because it happens for people everywhere and you're no less deserving. So, I mean, obviously be committed to your craft and have a level of proficiency at it. But I think it's good to believe in possibility.
Definitely. Just one more thing on that. How do you feel about marriage now? Because obviously younger you was set on being engaged. And
yeah, as she so frequently wrote in this diary.
Living with the fiance,
getting married at 25, 26, not too soon. You know why I wanted to do that? It's so crazy. Another thing I've unpacked in therapy. When I was like 18, 19, everyone out of high school, a lot of people were getting engaged and doing that sort of thing. And they had these partners. This is actually wild, what I'm about to say. But I think when I look back at before I came out and was sort of just like, right, I'm going to just be true to self. I don't think I did this intentionally, but if I look back at all of my partners, a lot of them were white men. And I think based on, conversations I've had with my therapist, and I know it's true because of how I felt, I think I ended up in those relationships because being with them made me feel better by association. And so when I was 21, I was in a relationship with literally, he is to this day one of the best men I know in the whole world. And we have such a beautiful relationship. Like, we caught up recently, chatted for a couple of hours. Like, it's like old friends, you know? But when we were in that relationship, I really felt like being with him meant that I was better. And I still felt like I was cheating my way into circles that I didn't really fit into. I lived in an area that wasn't as affluent and things like that. But it was so crazy that I picked relationships based on how they made me feel. And so marriage then was like the ultimate symbol of, if I can get married, that means I'm worth something. If I'm somebody's wife, I'm worth something. And so now the way I feel about it is, I'm worth something. So if marriage is on the cards, it's on the cards.
But it's not for that same reason.
It's not for that same reason. And I also think relationships, it depends on what you're trying to do, but I think I'd be okay if I never get married, because I'm in a really beautiful relationship. And if that was to continue for the rest of my life and there was no wedding, great, but that doesn't define, I think we put so much pressure on marriage. And, I know you've spoken about all of this very openly, but people put so much pressure on you that once you're in it, or you've got to do it, otherwise your relationship's not legit. I think relationships are different to every person. They're complex. So for me, it's if it happens, it happens, but I also am not too fussed, Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I wrap up every episode with a little segment called Oranges and Lemons. And your lemon is something a bit more sour. It may have happened today or over the last couple of days. And then your orange is your positive, sweet thing.
Okay. My lemon is 2 nights ago. I had a lot of anxiety. So like I said, I struggle with anxiety. And I have this is like so like deep diving into it, but I have this deep seated fear of something happening to my parents. And it sounds so crazy because everything's okay. They're all good. I was just with them that day. I couldn't sleep. My mind goes into like this functional freeze thing. And I had a show on. I wasn't staying at my partner's at night. I had a TV show on in bed and I was flicking through apps and I had this sense of dread and this feeling of imagining worst case scenarios. And that's what anxiety does sometimes, your mind starts freaking out about things that are not happening. And it was really overwhelming because it is something that I work through in therapy. And I'd like to think I'm getting better at it, but it really sort of just unsettled me that evening. But then the next day I had a really lovely conversation with my partner and helped me work through it and where that comes from and reminding me of why I don't have to live in those deep-rooted fears that sort of drive those sorts of things. So my lemon is anxiety sometimes. And it can be often depending on what I'm going through and whatnot, but it doesn't define me and I'm learning to manage it and live with it. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Definitely.
My orange is, you know what? Yesterday after work, I was so excited to do this. I finished the workday. I went home to my girlfriend's and we, with her 2-year-old son, we just went for a walk to the supermarket. We got stuff for dinner and we had a little walk and a little play. And it's literally just that. It's simple moments that I get to share with them. That's definitely my orange for the week. It was very sweet.
Very wholesome.
Yeah. I feel very, lucky.
That's
lucky.
So nice. My lemon is just a little... It's kind of minor, but it's also stressing me a little bit. I have a shoot this afternoon and I went to pick up a backdrop and I was like, it'll be fine. I'm driving my boyfriend's Corolla. It wasn't fine. And I got there and I was like running late. Well, if I stood there for longer, I said to the guy, I'm like, look, we can try this every which way. I don't think it's going to fit in and I have to go. I have to go back, but I think I'm going to maybe borrow Dan's car because the Corolla is just not going to do the trick.
We love a Corolla, but backdrops are big girls. Like they, it's hard to get them in.
Yeah.
Even if
the Corolla, I think the Corolla has probably done its dash and there's been many moments recently that have like sort of pointed to that. And
Yeah. And this was it. This is like nail in the coffin.
This is the Corolla.
Your time
we need
come.
to move on. Maybe I need a van. That was a bit of a lemon. And then my orange is that I just had the most amazing trip with my beautiful cousin Georgie. And we haven't had that much time together since we were kids.
Wow.
And it was just the best. I think being with a family member like that, you know, you grow up together and you see so much of each other that people don't see. And I feel like throughout the week we were really back to being our childish selves, and it was so much fun.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah, such a big orange. I feel like I'll be
huge
hanging
orange.
off that orange all week.
I love that. You're so right. You sort of revert to like that version of yourself that's allowed to just be the most realist, like truest you. I love that for you. So are you sandboarding?
I was really good at it.
I might actually follow up for some tips, because I did the exact same thing as you in 2019.
You stacked it?
I almost broke my neck. Okay. It was like really bad. I feel
like you can't be good at everything, and you are good at many things.
But don't you think they need to give people warnings about it? Like it's quite.
No, do you know? I actually did it once. The first time I did it, I nailed it. The second time, Georgie was like, "Let me film you. Like, look at me and wave." So I looked at her and I waved, and then by the time I turned and faced the way I was going, it was too late, and I was done. And I saw my life flash before my eyes. But the sand was a kind of soft landing, so it was okay.
It's more like your dignity that gets hurt. You have to stand back up and sort of, I'm cool.
So then you just got to lean in, post it, let everyone laugh at you as well, and then it's fine.
You know, solicit tips like you did. So I look forward to the tutorial.
Yeah, the hot tip is don't do what I did. Thank you so much. You have been an absolute delight to chat to, and I appreciate you being so honest and open. It's been so lovely.
Thank you, my darling. I love catching up with you.
Me
always.
too. Always a pleasure. Thanks for listening to Tell Me More. This show wouldn't be possible without you. If you'd like to show your support, please subscribe or follow the podcast on your favourite platforms, and don't forget you can watch full episodes on YouTube and Spotify.